Hello and welcome back to Rear Winging It, the Formula One podcast. This week we're in China, another race, the season fully underway now. I'm joined by my co-host Harry.
Hello.
And our other co-host Ellie.
Hello.
Hello, welcome back. A good week for F1, do you guys think? Settling into the new regulations, did you enjoy the weekend?
Yeah, I did.
Good. Harry, how about you? Did you enjoy the race? Enjoy the overall weekend?
Yeah, I thought it was a good one. Obviously sprint race weekend, so that adds
yes,
a little bit extra with sprint quali and the sprint race. But I enjoyed both, and I thought we got some good racing, which was the main highlight for me.
Good. Right, well, like you say, sprint weekend, so plenty to get through. So let's jump straight into it. So obviously, starting off with sprint qualifying, looked like McLaren closed the gap to Ferrari a little bit in sprint qualifying at least. Russell again was faster than Antonelli, 0.3 seconds this time. Do you think we've got our early season favourites in place now that we've seen a second lot of qualifying? Do you think it really is showing that Mercedes are the team to beat?
I think the gaps between them and the teams beneath them, it's huge. So I definitely think if you don't think they're the favourites, you're watching a different sport.
Yeah, I think it's clear they've just got a monster engine, just like 2014, and I think it'll be a long time before anyone can come into real touching distance. But like you said, the McLarens did look better in this session, and I guess really just this session alone. But they looked a little bit more competitive with Ferrari, so at least there's something positive to take away from the weekend for them.
Yeah, for McLaren definitely. If a very faint slimmer of hope for them after what we'll get into it more, but after what was a pretty rough weekend for them. Hamilton as well, looking more like the Hamilton of old, talking to 2014, more like that era of Hamilton, or the whole weekend really, right? Much more like his usual self, if you can say that. I know it's not been that for a few years now, but looking more and more like the Hamilton of the 2010s.
Yeah, I think it's China. It's a race that he loves, and he's been really successful in the past. But it was also good last weekend. Yeah. He's feeling much happier than he was this time last season. So I think it'll be interesting if he can keep that performance up across the season. But I'd put money on it definitely being more likely than last year.
Oh, big time. Well, I suppose last year his best result with Ferrari really was the sprint winning China, so it's clearly a track that he enjoys.
Yeah.
So obviously Hamilton's long-term rival Max Verstappen out-qualified by Pierre Gasly in the sprint qualifying. Harry, any thoughts on that you want to share? Pierre Gasly out-qualifying Max Verstappen, the four-time world champion?
No. I'm not a happy man. Obviously, Red Bull are really struggling so far.
Yeah,
and Alpine are, really up there in terms of the midfield. So, yeah, I mean, fair play to Pierre. I mean, I really like him as a driver, but God, I hate Alpine. So it's not great.
Yeah. Well, I suppose for Alpine, it's the their purchasing choice of a Mercedes engine's really really paying off.
I think when you consider,
who knows what happened, but
when you consider like the Alpine last year to this year and the Aston Martin last year to this year, obviously you can't say it's all the engine, but it must be such a big part of those teams like diverging fortunes.
Oh yeah, especially like until June, where Mercedes have this like apparent advantage with their compression ratio and all this, and clearly have the fastest engine. Like at this stage of a regulation, having an engine that's a lot quicker is absolutely huge, isn't it? So good for Pierre on that one. I probably felt good for him as well. Obviously, former Red Bull driver to get one up over Max Verstappen probably felt quite good. So moving on to the sprint itself, then obviously the Mercedes were up there, but not for long. Antonelli had an absolutely horrible start. I think he fell down to like P10 or something like that after the first bit of the race. Do you think that's just a one-off issue? Do you think that's something we've got to look out for with Antonelli as his starts? I can't think of it being much of a problem in the past. Do you think he just got it wrong this week?
I think it's just the new start procedure. I don't think he's quite mastered that yet. Especially maybe there's a psychological factor where he knows that the Ferraris behind him are going to be so quick.
And they were again, right?
Yeah, maybe he's just like, I don't know, overthinking it, trying too hard, but also it's not natural because it's not what they're used to. So maybe he'll just take a little bit more time to adapt.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's true of all the drivers, isn't it? Really, that we're still in a learning phase with the starts. But like you say, we've just touched on it, that Ferrari, again, absolutely rocket ships off the line. I think it was Hamilton. Hamilton took the lead of the race within a couple of corners, basically because of the quality of their start. Both Ferraris seem to just be nailing it week in, week out. I mean, there's been 2 weeks, so week in and out, they've nailed the start. But Mercedes seem to be able to claw it back. Do you think with time Mercedes will improve their start, or do you think they're not too worried because they know that they're going to get them back in just pure race pace throughout the rest of the race?
I don't think they'll be too worried because they have the pace, but at the same time, falling back at the start, it does risk being in unnecessarily precarious situations. Most crashes happen off of the start, and if they're bogged down and Ferrari's going past them at pace, I just think it makes them more likely to be in a crash or to fall down a few places. You're more likely to be in with the traffic and to get a knock. And I don't know if you guys have seen, but the front wing changes take so long because of the electrical components in them this year. So a front wing change is a much bigger issue than it was last season. So you really don't want to be getting a knock around the first few corners. So I think that obviously they're going to try and improve it. But obviously, they're confident they have the race pace to claw it back.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. We'll come on to that. That Antonelli's start that we touched on kind of did leave him in that midfield battle, and he ended up kind of sideswiping Isaac Hadjar and ended up with a 10-second penalty, essentially just because of his bad start. So you're right in saying that, like, how important the start is and getting yourself in trouble. That was kind of an unforced error by him almost to get himself in that trouble, and ended up with a 10-second penalty. Another team that very many seconds off the pace, as it were, Cadillac. Perez was 7 seconds off of the Aston Martins. Obviously, last week we spoke at a good length about Aston Martin and their struggles. Still very much in those struggles. Are you surprised at how off the pace Cadillac have seemed so far? Or do you think it's not surprising for what is a brand new team?
No, I think it's pretty standard. I mean, everyone was expecting them to be the worst. I think pre-season testing, they looked like the worst. I think the sort of, like I said last week, the oxygen sort of got taken up by, Williams, Aston Martin maybe being surprisingly bad. I think that's why they're not getting so much talk, is just because of how expected it is. Look, they're a new team to the grid. Everything's from scratch. It's not like Audi coming in and sort of, taking over a team. The fact that reliability-wise, obviously in the sprint, one driver finished. In the actual race, both drivers managed to finish. I mean, it's better than Aston Martin can say. So at least you're getting a bit more time on track to develop. And look, there's a long way to go, obviously, no denying that. But I don't think it's nothing to be worried about yet. I think that's kind of expected gap.
Yeah, I think for them it's more. This year it's just a learning experience more than anything, isn't it? It's gathering that data and learning as much as they can, right? Well, the other new team to the grid, Audi, then Hülkenberg pulled up right at the end of the first corner, full safety car, which I was surprised to see a lot of teams pit then, actually, in a sprint race. I thought a lot of them would have said, well, this is a few laps off of the tyres where they're not going to be at full stress. But a lot of teams did choose to pit, including Mercedes, who had to serve that 10-second penalty for Antonelli. But with a few laps left, he still ended up in P4. So a real showing of the dominance of the Mercedes car, I think.
Yeah.
Were you surprised that they brought him in with that 10-second penalty? Or do you think they didn't really have a choice at that point?
I think it was on the balance of probabilities, that pretty much everyone was going to pit just because of the kind of cascading effect.
Yeah.
I think you could predict that the Ferraris would have done it, and therefore, pitting George, and that would leave Antonelli maybe quite exposed. So get him in, take the penalty. They know the car's fast, and he can then go free rein with it, out of the way to charge up the field, and he did. P4 is a good result for him in the end. So
because also, if you finish with a 10-second time penalty and the grid is still reasonably bunched up, you're going to tumble quite far.
Yeah,
whereas
you're kind of doomed, aren't you?
Yeah, whereas if you can kind of get it served and then go and race, maybe it's like you can claw back a few more places.
Yeah.
But a good sprint though overall. I mean, China for me, if you're going to have a sprint race, China's one of the tracks, right? I think throughout the whole weekend there was plenty of overtaking and changes in. I think sprints last year, you could argue that they were a bit processional with the lack of any pit stops, kind of the struggles with overtaking. I think this year a sprint race like that really does show the benefits we're going to see from these new regulations of a bit more unpredictability. It wasn't just like the people who qualified first won without having to try almost, right? So I think it was a good showing for the regulations having a sprint race this early in the season. So moving on to full qualifying then for the Grand Prix. Obviously, big headline, youngest ever pole sitter, Kimi Antonelli. We spoke a bit last week about how much he could support George Russell in a potential championship bid. Do you think this was him opening his own account and telling people, hey, don't forget about me this year? Or do you think that's a bit too early to tell?
I gave him my driver of the day last week. I said, I think, I do think people were underestimating him, but I think it's because in the first two qualifying sessions, the sprint quali this week and the full quali from Australia, he was 2.5, 3/10 of a second slower, which is quite a big gap between teammates.
Yeah.
So I think to then go and grab pole, I mean, Russell was affected with reliability issues and he only really had one lap in Q3 to really go for it. So there's obviously an element of Russell, maybe Russell didn't have the full, but I don't know. I definitely think people have to take him seriously, but he's also still, is he 19 years old, whatever, so he's a bit more unpredictable than Russell, because Russell, the last year we spoke about his consistency, and I think that's probably what will make him the championship favourite.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, if we think about, I mean, we'll get onto the race in a minute, but if we think about the sprint, Antonelli was a bit chaotic with a bad start, penalty, obviously recovered really well, but meanwhile Russell kept his head nice and smooth, got the win. So good point there. Ferrari though, another strong showing in qualifying, still a step behind the Mercedes, but I think this week kind of showed that they clearly have a bit of a gap at least to the McLarens, which they were ahead of both of them. Do you think the McLarens, obviously we'll get onto what happened in the race in a minute, but do you think the McLarens were going to start to panic a bit now? Because it's been two races in a row that they've been out-qualified by the Mercedes and the Ferraris, both in full. Do you think it's panic stations for them, or do you think their calmer heads will prevail?
It's hard to say, but I think gut feeling is there's development legs on that McLaren. I think coming out of the garage, I don't think there was necessarily panic. There's got to be some acceptance that, all right, we're not the fastest, and maybe we're not right at the top of the field, but I think anytime you come into this bigger shake-up, as long as you're within touching distance, you not take it as a win, but you kind of just have to accept that as where you are, and you might not be fastest overall. So yeah.
I think we touched on it last. That they're not Williams.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I think we touched on it last week that at this stage of a development cycle being so early that you can make some really big gains in lap time quite quickly. So maybe hopefully that's for them. Hopefully that's where their head's at, just thinking what they can do to try and get on level terms and make this a 3-horse race instead of the 2-horse race it looks like so far.
But even then, I don't even know if it is a 2-horse race. I think like it's just a 1-horse race at the moment with the gaps. Obviously, hopefully Ferrari do close it. But before the season, it was kind of billed as maybe 3, maybe 4 teams, all similar kind of pace. But there's a clear order, I think, between the top 4 teams. I don't even know if they are the top 4 teams anymore, but there's a clear kind of order between their pace.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And the teams have seemed, at least the top teams, have been very grouped in terms of their drivers qualifying similarly, which I guess again makes sense in earlier regulations that like there's bigger gaps in time between teams. Speaking of gaps between teams and time, Max Verstappen 1 second off the pace. It's probably been a long time since you could say that about Max in a qualifying session. Gasly again out-qualified. Well, yeah. Gasly again out-qualified both Red Bulls. P7 for him, very impressive. We've touched upon Alpine and their Mercedes rocket ship in the back in their engine. Red Bull are definitely in panic stations, right? Much more than McLaren will be. I'm assuming Red Bull now are going to be in full panic station mode. Do you think there's anything they can do to try and turn their season around, or do you think they're resigned this season to just being off the pace?
Do you know what? I don't think so. I think Laurent Marquis last year, obviously he took over midway through, and the development under him was like phenomenal. It put Verstappen back in a championship fight.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
I know that McLaren kind of played him into the fight a bit, but I know that he said that they kept developing last year's car so that they were well practiced at it for this season. So I think, obviously they'll be disappointed at where they seem to have shaken up, but I think they'll be confident that they can make improvements, not necessarily to go and challenge Mercedes, but maybe to go and challenge the Ferrari a bit more. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. I think you're right. I think they'll probably know that the championship is going to be out of reach this year for sure. But if they can get into the top, I think their aim is probably to try and be at least 3rd or 4th, right?
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, if you look at it realistically now, 3rd would be good. Compared to where they are now, 4th would kind of be a disappointment. At the moment it'd be we beat the Alpine. I mean, that's not great.
Well, they're struggling to do that in a minute.
Yeah, 3rd, and if by the end of the season they're competing and grabbing podiums and stuff, then that would be a good result. I think that would be amazing. But we'll have to wait and see. Like Ellie said, they did it last year. Max, with a car that's capable of doing that, will do it. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I wouldn't write them off just yet.
Speaking of a team that we kind of wrote off a bit with Cadillac, Valtteri Bottas did manage to out-qualify Lance Stroll, so they weren't quite at the back of the grid in qualifying. Aston Martin were with Lance Stroll there. Okay, moving on to the race then. Obviously, big news before we even get started. Neither McLaren even made it to the grid. Both apparently with separate technical issues, so unrelated, but just very unfortunate that they both happened to both cars at the same time, essentially. Worrying for McLaren, do you think? I think at this stage of the regulations, it's bound to happen, right? They didn't seem too concerned again, but another big loss of points for McLaren, especially after last week, where Piastri hasn't done a single racing lap so far. Do you think that's putting him at a bit of a disadvantage for next race?
Yeah, I mean, when you have these newer cars, I mean, every lap counts. So I think not having raced for the last 2 weeks is going to have an impact. But he's an experienced driver. He'll be able to get in that car as long as it actually works. I mean, as one of the journalists said in the sort of post race interview, wasn't exactly post race for him, but he got further than last week. So hopefully,
I saw that
in Japan he'll actually make it to the start line and get a couple laps in at least.
Yeah, because they did make it to, I know Piastri managed to do his lap to the grid and he got out of the car.
Right, yeah.
And it was an issue
Sorry,
when
he did
they
technically
were...
make the grid, yeah.
but he didn't make the start of the race. You know, they obviously will.
Yeah. Concerning. Right, so when the race actually did get underway, though, another great start from Ferrari. Lots of overtaking in the opening phases of the race. The lead changed hands quite a few times. One of the better race starts I think we've seen in a while. I think. Do you think that's a sign of these new regulations, especially with what we've touched on with the engines and the some people starting a lot better than others? Do you think this is what we've got to get used to now with these kind of really frenetic starts?
I think so. I think they are a bit more chaotic, but then maybe that's the chaos is a good thing. You do see a lot of people opening laps kind of gaining and losing a lot of places, which in previous seasons maybe you only really saw that if they'd had a really bad start, got bogged down, or had a technical kind of issue. You didn't necessarily see that starting pace difference as the same. So I think it is just different. People will obviously improve and it will become closer. That's just how the regulations will kind of converge. Everyone will converge on one idea, one, like, the fastest way. But yeah, no, I think it's exciting. And that's what we want. We want more overtaking. We want more excitement.
Yeah.
So
Big time.
Yeah, I don't mind it.
Well, their excitement didn't really stop there, to be fair. So Ferrari were battling at each other all race. No team orders, it looked like, at Ferrari. Would have been weird at this stage of the season to bring in team orders, but it does look like they are just open to race. And I was mentioning to one of my friends earlier, it was nice to see Lewis Hamilton be Lewis Hamilton again, is what I'll say. To see him really put it to, at the front of the race, really go for it and really make some great moves out there with the new regulations seeming to suit his driving style, do you think? Or is it too early to say that?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like he's much happier in the car. Obviously, his performance has been good so far. I mean, I will say they were good at this point last season as well, so it's a long way to go. But I think attitude says a lot. He seems really happy. I mean,
I think that's the big thing, right?
I mean, just the podium celebrations, the radio message. This is clearly him in his element. He's having a great time. And mindset plays a large part of it. So if he keeps that going, then that will inform the driving. But he really hated the ground effect era. So going away from that, then yeah, I think it does suit his driving style a bit more. You then got drivers like Max who really don't like it. I think Lando's raised concerns.
I think that's when they're not doing well this year. So it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I think I can see what Max was saying. It's like Mario Kart, and you can see that with the boost, the overtake. You overtake at a certain point of the track. A couple corners later, you've used up all your sort of boost, your energy, and so they retake the position. And
it's a different style of racing for sure.
Exactly,
it's more
I think it's
Formula
just
E adjacent,
I was finding myself getting quite into it though, because I was quite enjoying almost seeing the graphics on screen, and there was a point where it looked like Russell was getting close, because there was a period of time where he was behind both Ferraris. And it looked like he was getting close, but then he had the overtake, and it's like, oh my god, but then his battery ran out, so he couldn't do it, so he hadn't timed it properly. I think we're going to see some when the drivers get up to speed with it and really understand how it works better and how their car reacts to it more. I think we're going to see some really interesting styles of racing emerge. Different, definitely, very different. But I think we're going to see some interesting racing this year with the battery being so focal.
Yeah, I think you kind of had to think about it a bit more as a driver. You have to kind of be a bit. I mean, they did obviously used to have to be smart about, okay, well, overtake them here, because then they won't get DRS back for
DRS
me. I'll get
zones.
another, So they did used to think about it like that. But I do think, I wonder what battery they're using so that I can try and have more. There's a different element to it now.
But that I think feels more genuine than DRS zones. DRS zones. I remember, I know what you're saying, where we used to see people brake to let the person get the DRS.
Yeah.
That felt a bit cheap. Whereas at least with the battery, it's you and your car, and not about an extra advantage. I know you get the overtake right with it, which gives you an extra half a megajoule of energy, but it feels more genuine than that at least. And that I think maybe at the very least that feels like a step in the right direction. So another well, if you can call it a step in the right direction. Alonso managed 32 laps this week before he had to stop. Lost all feeling in his hands. So obviously we touched on this last week with the Honda engine sending vibrations through to the drivers. It's quite scary scenes almost from his cockpit, where he's taken his hands off in the straights to stretch his hands out. I can't imagine the FIA was very happy seeing scenes like that with a driver going down the track with no hands on the steering wheel.
Yeah, I mean,
do you think it's a safety issue at a certain point? I mean, definitely, it is clearly already, right?
It's a safety issue not just for the other drivers, but for their own safety, for like Alonso's own well-being. It's kind of, when there were porpoising issues that were affecting all teams, there was talk of this is going to give us brain damage. But I guess when it affects one team, it's like, well, you can fix the problem. No one else is experiencing this. That's your fault.
That at least an easy fix is that it was just to raise the ride height, and you're not competitive, but it's safer. Whereas here, it's like, what are they going to do? Turn the engine off?
Exactly. But there was an onboard shot that they cut to, and the vibrations were very noticeable. It was It was quite severe. So I mean, 32 laps was quite some achievement, I thought. But at the same time, for what? Why? He couldn't feel his hands. Why did he carry on for so long? Obviously, there's like the racing driver in him that just wants to keep going. But at a certain point, maybe there should be an actual limit of no, you can't do any more than this.
I think for him, this is very likely his last season of F1. So I can't imagine how frustrating it is, but I can imagine him wanting to get every single lap out that he can. But at a certain point, it becomes a bit of a safety problem, doesn't it? But hey, we've got Japan, and then, well, we'll come on to it a bit, but kind of an impromptu break to really give him some time to work on that engine. So fingers crossed there's only maybe 1 or 2 more races before they get that fixed for them. But I mean, who knows? It could be a season-long issue. Just time will tell. Another retiree then, Max Verstappen. So quite an eventful race for Max. He had to work his way through the grid a few times, did a really good job with it, but then reliability issues that we're going to see a lot of this year, retired on lap 45. Do you think there's any green shoots for Red Bull that they were able to work their way through the pack like that, or do you think they'll be more concerned about another DNF for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to see your car be competitive-ish on track. I mean, didn't quite have the pace of the Ferraris or Mercedes, obviously, but he was out there overtaking. So yes, some positives. I don't think form was quite as bad as what qualifying would suggest. However, those reliabilities issues really taking effect. I mean, it's expected, but obviously we've had Hadja have his car had to stop. We've now had Verstappen here. I mean, if they can work out the issues and get them sorted, then that would be fantastic. But bit of a shock, a bit of a difference to last season, where these kind of sort of mid-lap just retire the car messages were a lot less uncommon.
Yeah, again, we touched on it last week. It does feel like the F1 of old, where it's very rare to have every driver finish without some kind of mechanical, right?
Yeah, we had 4 drivers not even start the race.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a few people who did make it all the way to the end then. After a tough week for Williams last week, Carlos Sainz, 2 points for Williams. Probably quite a good result for them at the minute. Do you think they'll be happy with that?
No. I think that they'll still be disappointed where they are. I think Carlos had a great race. He was kind of fortunate with some of the safety cars when maybe Albon was a bit less fortunate with the timings. But 2 points for Williams and saying, oh, that's such a good job for Williams is the polar opposite of where they were last year, where
true.
They were getting podiums and finishing it with good points regularly. So they've taken a big step backwards. But to get points is important when you're fighting out of the back of the championship.
And it is interesting don't want to spend too much time on it, but it is interesting that because obviously Williams' big motto since Vowles has come in has been break everything, it's all about 2026. Whereas actually last year they seem to have a better car than this year, so it's quite interesting how that's shaken out for them. Ollie Beerman, P5, great race from him. Another great race, second one of the season for him. Another good result. Meanwhile, his teammate Ocon crashes, 10-second penalty. I mean, I think we'd all appreciate at this point that that Beerman's going to be a better driver than Esteban Ocon. But do you think it'd be that apparent this early into their time racing together?
Do you know what? I think last year, towards the end of the season, Beerman was given a really good account of himself, and he seems to have started exactly where he left off. And I guess it poses the question of, like, how much longer does Ocon have in the sport if he is outperformed massively over the season by Beerman? How much longer people look at him as, like, a viable option, especially when
F1 driver. Yeah.
Exactly, especially when he causes so much damage to the cars. He's an expensive driver to kind of have around.
Yeah, that's a good point. But then I think that might be more about the quality of Ollie Beerman. I mean, do you think this is a long shot, but do you think there is a future seat at Red Bull? Not Red Bull. Do you think there is a future seat at Ferrari for him? Obviously, part of their young driver program. I personally think it's an inevitability that at this point already, when Hamilton retires or leaves Ferrari, which is probably going to happen before Leclerc does, that Beerman is the person to step into that seat. Would you agree with that, or do you think that's a bit premature of me?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the maybe the plan. You know, whether it's set in stone, I don't know. I think it all depends on, like you said, on what happens with Hamilton, but also Leclerc. I mean, I think he's sort of signed a blood pact with Ferrari, but you never know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then how obviously Beerman does, but yeah, I think that's where he's sort of destined to end up. So it'll be interesting to see if he makes it.
Okay, so we've touched on them quite a bit already, but Alpine, double points finish for them. Colapinto, I think that was his first ever points in F1 this week. I think a great drive from him. He was battling all throughout. But P6 for Gasly, up there with the big boys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's kind of skewed because of the McLaren's DNSs.
Yeah, well, of course. But then they made the start line and McLaren didn't, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you think, we've touched on it already, how much of it is engine versus the car, but a good storyline to see Alpine, who've been really struggling in the last few years, to get a few results out there. Obviously, moving on then, let's move swiftly on to our driver of the day. Harry, do you want to lead us off with your driver of the day?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm hoping there were some great performances out there, so hoping maybe we'll have different ones, but I'm going to give it to Lewis Hamilton, actually. Didn't think that was the name that was going to come out of my head. But I said to my dad, I said, you know what? It's really good to see Lewis back in his prime. You know, not being a Lewis sort of Mercedes fan myself. You know, when you see someone who is that good out there performing well, and I mean the whole race, really the whole race weekend, I think he was at the centre of the action. There was some great battle for the 5th down to 10th for the points, but really that was where it was at. The two Ferraris, Hamilton with Russell, like I mean, it was a great performance to see him get finally a proper podium with Ferrari. To see him up there on the podium with Antonelli, I think it was just a whole great storyline as well, which pulled in.
Bono just looked like so proud of them both.
Yeah. What a great day for Bono, to be fair, yeah.
There was a moment where George Russell stepped aside so that Antonelli, Bono and Hamilton could have their picture taken, which was really, really sweet. That's so funny. Obviously, he knows all three drivers very well, so he must have been really happy when I imagine Toto or whatever taps him on the shoulder and says, you can go on the podium today. And
I think it was obviously a deliberate choice by Mercedes, because if anyone doesn't know, that is Bono was Lewis's race engineer when Lewis was at Mercedes, winning all those championships. So probably a very nice full circle moment for Bono for his current young driver's first win and his old driver's first podium with Ferrari. A nice moment for him. Ellie, your driver of the day?
So I was actually going to say Hamilton, I did also see that Toto was like, "Oh, like, we have 3 drivers on the podium. That's so strange." I'm still not sure he's quite got his head around the fact that Lewis doesn't race for them anymore. So I was gonna go, and then last week I said Antonelli, but this week, do you know what? I'm gonna go with Behrman. I think best of the rest. That Haas looks pretty good, and he looks very
even better,
confident, very like self-assured. In that car. So yeah, a great drive from him, and I think we're getting kind of used to it now, those kind of performances.
Yeah.
But a great kind of like weekend. I think in the other parts of the weekend, maybe he flew under the radar a bit more, but it kind of had his time to shine in the race.
Like you say, I mean, we're kind of getting used to that level of performance from Ollie Behrman, and we do have to remember that he is in a Haas, which has not been amazing for too many years. So very impressive. I'm going to go a slightly different direction, actually, and I thought this at the time watching it, just for the overall performance and how much battling he did, overtakes, being overtaken, re-overtaking, ended his way in P10. I'm going to go with Franco Colapinto. I think, knowing the driver he has been in the past, quite crash heavy, bit rash, I think it was actually a really assured drive from him.
Well, he was in the wars.
Stayed out quite a while.
That crashed into him, right?
Yeah, well, exactly, and then he recovered really well from that to end up with P10. So obviously he stayed out a long time on the hard tyres initially, and he just nailed the strategy, I think. And for him, P10, great result. So proud of him. So I'm going to give it to Colapinto this week.
I think, obviously, I think we do have to just mention Antonelli maiden win. I thought someone would say it. It's like, I'm not going to say
maybe
it.
we should,
But, yeah. Also amazing performance. And,
a great performance. And also, I'll just say this then, to add on to that. When Russell did clear the Ferraris, he didn't go and charge down Antonelli as a lot of people probably thought he would have. Antonelli kind of held his own. He did have a little adventure at one point. Where he run a bit wide, but he managed to keep it together. So yeah, I think it kind of proved he does have the race pace to match or better Russell.
Yeah, not to take away from that, I think it just also shows the sort of importance of qualifying well and getting away at that start. Because if we're going to see passes and repasses, you are chewing through your tyres a lot more. So Russell being sort of more in the wars and more in those battles maybe meant that he didn't quite have the tyres to push in critical moments when he needed to. That saying, I think Antonelli did have the pace over Russell. He seemed, every stint
so this week,
sort of ahead of him. So in this race anyway. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, we touched on the sprint and how much work he had to do to overcome that 10-second penalty. I think this was his track and his weekend, to be honest. That leads us nicely on to grid news.
Hello and welcome to Grid News. So, Bernd Mailander has driven more Grand Prix laps than Oscar Piastri this year. Obviously, Piastri is currently sitting at 0. Bahrain and Saudi Arabia have been called off. Thank you to Donald Trump for starting a war that nobody wanted. So this is going to leave us a 5-week gap in the schedule after Japan. So obviously, teams aren't allowed to do as much testing as they want. It's, they have a certain amount of tests that they can do throughout the season. So it's not necessarily going to give them a big window of opportunity to go and test new components, but I guess it gives them a bit of time to recoup back at base and get everybody looking at the best ways to improve. I think it feels kind of almost quite natural to have a break after 3 races so everyone can reassess the start and kind of go through their programs of, we could change this and, get a bit of performance here. So we'll see if people come back after the 5 weeks with a big boost in performance or if it's kind of business as usual. But because Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, they pay the most amount of money to Formula One in order to host the races, it's going to cost Formula One and Liberty Media about £100 million, which I believe will come out of the amount that teams get at the end of the year. So when...
Yeah, I think that's right.
It's when it's distributed out, there'll be £100 million less to go about. So for some teams, maybe not as big a deal, but for other teams, like the smaller teams, Haas, etc., that will be quite a
fair chunk
blow,
of change.
A blow to them. So Ferrari have blocked a change to the start procedure. I do believe that FIA can go around it. They don't need everybody's approval. But in like preliminary talks, they said, nope, we'll keep it the same. I think George Russell was quite annoyed about this, you know.
Yeah.
Some people say it's dangerous. Ferrari obviously say there's nothing wrong with it because they don't, you know, they want to keep their advantage. And then our final bit of grid news, a bit of news out of York. There was a Kit Kat F1 car, so a full-sized car, I believe, was bought by Nestle. Nestle have a factory in the city. Some people say York smells like chocolate, but I always thought it smelled like
Can confirm it does.
Urine. But York is the birthplace of the Kit Kat, apparently, and there was a Kit Kat Formula One car.
Well, they make him here. I don't know. They make him here now. Who knows if it was the foundation? But
if it was the
they
foundation.
certainly make him here.
There was 16,900 bars used in a 350 kilogram car. So what we've learned from that is Williams would probably be better off if they made their car out of Kit Kats.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be lighter.
It would be lighter, yeah. So yeah, that's all for grid news this week.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Okay, so the action doesn't stop there. We've got a week break now, so 2 weeks to the next race, which is Japan. Japan, I'll go first with my thoughts on Japan, just because I started talking already. Japan, I think, will be an interesting one. So last year, Japan, not many overtakes, really hard to get past. Verstappen, in a slower car, basically managed to hold on for the victory. It's going to be really interesting, and I think the biggest test of this regulations, the biggest early test of this regulations, to see how Japan goes, see if it is different, if there is more overtaking, if there is more chance for people to get past. I personally am quite excited for Japan to see what the difference is like versus last year. I'll give my own predicted top three. I'll be boring. I don't think we're going to see much different. I think this early part of the season pretty set in stone who the top runners are. I'm going to go with another Mercedes 1-2. I'm going to go Russell in first, Hamilton in second, Antonelli third. That's my top three. Harry, what are your predictions for Japan? And give me your top three.
I think it will be hard. I'll be hard pressed with the kind of gaps that we're seeing to put anyone other than the Mercedes top two. I think if it's going to be any different, it will be because of reliability and or crashes. Crashes may be more likely from Antonelli than Russell, but I think other than that, I think at this point, I mean, Hamilton was 25 seconds off Antonelli, I think, so that's a big gap, and that's not going to be just track specific. So I don't think we'll see much change, but like you said, I think I'm excited to see the difference on Suzuka and how the cars are there. I'm looking forward to it.
And if you give me a top three?
I really I agree with Harry with the gaps. I think initially the Mercedes and the Ferrari are able to kind of battle it out a bit more, but over the longer the stint goes on, the Ferrari isn't able to quite keep up. I think that the Mercedes is much better with tyre life, so I think it will be a Mercedes 1-2, Russell, Antonelli, and then I'll go Hamilton. So similar, yeah.
Well, that brings us nicely on to our final section then. Final thoughts. Ellie, I know this is your favourite section, so why don't you lead us off with your final thoughts for the race?
Do you know what my final thoughts aren't about the race? It's about the 3.5 kilo Kit Kat car. And if anybody is thinking about what to get me for Easter...
3.5 tons.
If anybody's thinking about what to get me for Easter, it would be a full-sized Formula One car made out of Kit Kats. So, yeah, you know where I live. Have it delivered.
There you go.
I
Hot off the press.
I'm just gutted that I didn't know this at the time, because I doubt it's still out there. It was really sunny today.
Probably
If
melted.
it's probably melted.
Yeah, it's warm today. Like Willy
But
Wonka.
I would have gone and seen that. I would have tried to steal it. Like, oh, jeez. So
I mean, I live here, and I didn't even go and see it. So shows what kind of fake F1 fan I am.
For the viewers that don't know Harry, I can tell you what he would have done if he had got his hands on the Kit Kat bar. He would have melted it down into one giant block and then put it in his fridge for a year, and then come back to it a year later and said, "Oh, my massive bar of chocolate has gone off."
that's really weirdly specific. I don't know why you'd predict that. Anywho's.
Anyway, why don't you give us your final thoughts, Harry, to move on?
He already did.
Yeah, the Kit Kat thing, but also, yeah, if we could have the same level of, the same sort of amount of laps of overtaking and repassing we had this race for the rest of the season, I'll be a very happy man. No matter what people say about the regulations, I think that would keep me content. So, yeah, optimistic.
Okay, on to me then. I've just had a brainwave for mine, actually. My final thought is, judging from the racing we saw from the two Ferraris, I want team orders to be banned again. I think the racing we saw between those two teammates was immense. There's something special when it's two teammates going against each other. The jeopardy just feels that much higher. And you love to see it when two teammates are allowed to really go at each other. So my final thought is ban team orders like they were in the past. That's my final thought. That brings us to the end then of this episode on the Chinese Grand Prix. Thank you very much for listening. Please like the podcast, subscribe, follow us on all the socials, and have a great week, and we'll see you after Japan. Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Bye.